This is, without a doubt, one of the biggest alien encounters in history. On January 20th, 1996, three young girls in Varginha, Brazil, took a shortcut home before they saw something they'd never forget. A strange alien-looking creature hunched over in the grass against a brick wall. It didn't speak to them, but they knew it was afraid and in pain. A citywide manhunt soon followed, with soldiers allegedly apprehending multiple of these so-called creatures. But the case didn't end there. Those that got too close were contaminated, killed, and buried immediately. Witnesses came forward but were later visited by mysterious men in black suits. They were forced to stay quiet for money. The media demanded answers, but the government gave none. The bodies were shipped elsewhere, and the evidence was hidden away forever. Time passed and the case was largely forgotten, until now. Just this week, alleged video evidence emerged of the Varginha alien, but its source is unknown. Where did it come from, and how does it relate to the Varginha case? Well, let's review the whole ordeal from start to finish, analyze the footage, and see how it fits into the big picture. Buckle up, cause this scare mail starts right now. Varginha wasn't known for much in the early 1990s. Located in the southwestern region of Minas Gerais, agriculture and coffee production reigned supreme above all else. It was a relatively small town at the time, just 80,000 occupants but growing. And many of these occupants were farmers and those in similar trades, living in and around the farmland of the region, which is where our story begins. Late one evening, Aurelina and Euricio de Freitas could hear their livestock being disturbed outside their home. So Aurelina goes ahead and pokes her head out the window to see something unusual. A large cigar-shaped object flying through the sky. But there was a problem. It appeared to be burning from the rear end and was descending fast. She called her husband over to take a look at what she was witnessing. She couldn't believe her eyes, and neither could he. They were surprised by its sheer size, stating it was the size of a school bus. Eventually, it surpassed the tree line nearby and they lost sight of it. But little did they know, someone else was following it. Carlos de Sousa was driving to Varginha on the night of January 13th to fly miniature planes with his friends the following morning. As he drives along the highway, he notices the same UFO overhead. He describes it just as the farmers did, claiming it was a cigar-shaped object that appeared to be damaged in the back. It was strangely wobbling, clearly struggling to maintain altitude as it descended. But instead of merely watching it go by, Carlos pulls off the freeway and follows the object into a nearby field until Sousa arrives at a fiery wreckage. He quickly gets out the car and runs over to the crash site until he is met with a powerful smell. The stench of burning sulfur and ammonia filled the air around him, making it difficult for him to breathe. Shielding his face, he looks at the pieces of debris on the ground and is astounded by the materials. It looks like lightweight metal, almost like tin foil, but even thinner. Before he can make heads or tails of what he's looking at, military vehicles storm onto the scene. Soldiers leap from their armored cars and run over to Carlos, pointing their guns and telling him to get back. He raises his hands and claims he's just trying to help, thinking that people are hurt and injured, but they don't seem to care too much. The soldiers move closer, guns pointed, and tell him to leave one last time, or else. So that's exactly what he did. But as Carlos drives away from the hellish scene, he can't help but wonder what he really stumbled upon. Luckily for him though, everyone in town would soon know what crash landed that night in Varginha. A A week later, 3 young girls by the names of Lilliana Silva, Valquiria Silva, and Katia Xavier decide to take a shortcut on their way home from school. As they cut through the vacant yard, Katia sees something out the corner of her eye. She turns her head and screams in terror at what she witnesses. The other girls do the same, turning around to see what has their friends so spooked, and in turn become spooked themselves. Standing in the shrubbery about 10 feet away from them is a mysterious alien creature, hunched over next to a brick wall. It has black, oily skin with big red eyes and has 3 ridges atop its large, egg-shaped head, along with a horrific smell to accompany all of it. However, the girls would later recount that the creature appeared more afraid of them than they were of it, claiming it seemed sad, afraid, and in need of help. But at the time, the girls could only flee in fear, sprinting home to tell Lilliana and Valkyria's mother what they had just witnessed. Nearby, military police officer Marco Chereze is in the passenger seat of his partner's vehicle patrolling the area. He sees one of the creatures limp across the road into the tall grass. He quickly orders his partner to stop and gets out the car, chasing the creature into the wilderness. Marco allegedly wrangles the alien with his bare hands, walking it over to a nearby hospital as it struggled to break free. Witnesses working at the hospital, who asked to remain anonymous, claimed the creature screamed like a child as it was dragged away. Marco didn't know it at the time, but he had just chillingly sealed his fate. Covered in supposed slime and the terrible scent of the humanoid, he quickly develops an infection over the next 2 weeks. The doctor who cares for him has never seen anything like it. He describes Marco's immune system completely shutting down, failing to respond to any sort of treatment. Eventually, Marco would sadly succumb to this mysterious illness. But before he dies, he tells his sister that the creature that gave him the sickness was real, and that the story would change the world. Enraged by all of this, his sister demands the autopsy report of her now deceased brother, but at first they refuse. She persists until they require she pay top dollar for the full report. Feeling frustrated and desperate, Marco's sister pays up, but to her surprise, the report is incomplete, with key pages missing. To this very day, Marco's sister is convinced her brother was the victim of a government cover-up. But this is far from the only cover-up in the case. Carlos de Sousa is eating lunch at a diner one day when he's interrupted by mysterious men in black suits. They claim to know everything about him, where he lives, the name of his daughter, and even what he planned on doing later that afternoon. Carlos doesn't need to hear anymore. He knows what they want and he's willing to give it to them. The silent threat works. The mother of the 2 girls is also visited by the men in black. However, unlike Sousa, she's given a choice. Claim your daughters made the whole story up and get this briefcase full of money, so long as it's spent outside of Brazil. Refuse and get nothing but trouble for the rest of your life. Of course, she turns it down, claiming she believes her daughters are telling the truth. She scolds the men and forces them to leave, so they did. She watches them drive away in a black sedan with no license plate, never to be seen again. Weeks pass as the plot thickens. A doctor at Varginha Hospital is told by military leaders to x-ray a body within a body bag. He does what he's told, but is never given the chance to see the findings. The soldiers confiscate the x-rays, thank the doctor for his cooperation, and leave. All he's left with is the powerful smell of ammonia in his nostrils, a smell that wouldn't go away for over a month. Other witnesses claim the bodies were loaded onto vehicles at Essa military base in Tres Carrições and were driven to Sao Paulo, where they are handed over to the United States Air Force. The theory is that Brazil didn't have any of the technology or the resources to study these mysterious creatures, but the United States did, and they were willing to pay an insurmountable amount of money to get their hands on them. So, with the aliens no longer in their possession, the Brazilian military felt the blockbuster case was finally behind them. Only it wasn't. The press had become increasingly frustrated. They had been silenced, ignored, and continually lied to. Eventually, the public pressure became too much, so General Lima would hold a press conference in hopes of putting out the fire. But instead, he'd only fan the flames by saying this.
Caso houvesse...
saber o que eles estavam fazendo no dia do acontecimento? Trabalhando. Em prol do exército, em prol da nação. Isso tem como ser comprovado? Para quem? Para a imprensa. Por quê? Porque não se quer provar os fatos? Não tem que provar. Tudo que eu tinha a dizer, eu disse.
So, after all this, surely the government would have to come clean about the entire incident, right? Well, no. With no physical evidence, there was nothing for the media or the general public to really go off of. Just witnesses and their own personal accounts. Until now. Is this the groundbreaking footage we've been waiting for? The piece of evidence that finally confirms everything the witnesses have spoken about? At first glance, it looks like it. It's clearly a 1990s video camera being used, so that tracks. However, it's got to be stated that just because it seems real doesn't mean it is. I'm only saying this because in my scare mail about Jonathan Reed, linked right here, I analyzed footage of his alleged alien encounter that looked pretty damn convincing. But there was one crucial thing I missed.
Whether...
Alright, so it's entirely possible that Jonathan Reed faked the whole thing and lit up a sparkler to make it look like he teleported with a piece of alien technology. That's on me, so let's move on with our lives, shall we? With that being said though, maybe we shouldn't compare apples to oranges here, because in James Fox's documentary, Moment of Contact, he speaks to a lot of witnesses that lived through the Varginha encounter, including those in the military. And many of them said that soldiers and other military members were walking around with cameras, documenting the whole ordeal. So it's not unrealistic to think they captured footage of everything. This was a historic moment for them as a country, so naturally they'd film as much as they could. It was even reported that a group of firefighters recovered one of the aliens in the woods. What we are looking at right now could very well be the footage of that recovery. Of course, with every piece of evidence comes the debunkers. Rony Vernay, an engineer, physicist, and UAP researcher based out of Rio de Janeiro, claimed to have received the video from an anonymous source back in 2024. Whoever handed the footage over asked for a sum of money in return for it. Now, it's uncertain whether Rony paid up or not, but he released the footage recently, stating that he believes the video to be a hoax, and is revealing it now after extensively analyzing the footage along with other experts in the field. But what other so-called experts reviewed this evidence? Well, someone I have a tremendous amount of respect for is James Fox. I referenced his documentary earlier about the Varginha case. I'll link it in the description. It's a very interesting watch, and it's available for free on YouTube, so why not? And what I like about Fox so much is that not only does he get his hands dirty in each and every case he covers, interviewing every witness he can, making sure no stone is left unturned, but he also does a great job, in my opinion, of not making the cases about himself, unlike a certain someone that will remain nameless. And Fox went on record and said that it's unfortunately fake. He says that there is, however, legitimate footage somewhere out there. We just haven't seen it yet. Not to mention, there are other red flags about this video. For starters, there's no audio. At least Jonathan Reed had some intense breathing and vomiting to go along with his footage. Whoever made this didn't even bother. Also, someone else by the name of Othello on Twitter, or X, discovered that a VHS overlay was added to make the video seem more legit. This means that this footage may have not even come from the 1990s, which is pretty disappointing. Not to mention the camera shakes were obviously done on purpose to make it harder to see the so-called alien. I'm also skeptical of anyone who asks for money in return for evidence. I can understand people trying to make a living off of their life experiences, but when it comes to verifying your own claims and getting the truth out there, it just comes off as pretty disingenuous. Like this guy Sosa Pippin from my recent Miami Mall video. He finally got back to me and asked what my budget was, despite him saying himself that he wasn't there. Yeah, I'm gonna go out on a limb here and assume this guy's full of shit. And with that, on top of many other things, all signs point to this video being fake. But let me know what you think down in the comments below, because just because it's fake doesn't mean I don't want to know where it came from. However, before you guys chew my head off in the comments, just because this footage is fake doesn't mean the Varginha alien encounter is. In Fox's documentary, he came across countless witnesses that had some sort of story to tell. They're not just embracing the hype. All of them fully believe something happened that day. De Sousa never made a single penny out of his experience. The three girls have been ridiculed and ostracized ever since they came forward. This story, this encounter, was not a blessing, it was a curse. And who are we to say that they're lying? I firmly believe the Varginha case did happen. And maybe this footage isn't the concrete evidence we were looking for, but maybe one day we'll find it, because if the X-Files have taught me anything, it's that the truth is out there. Thanks for watching, and oh, for the love of God, can I at least finish my sign off for once? 1 second.
Is it done?
It is. I think they bought it.
Good. You have done well, Midas Info agent.
So, what comes next?
We've been focusing on Earth too much. I think it's time we looked up into space.
What's that supposed to mean? No, like really, what's our next episode? I gotta get planning.
Just, I don't know yet, okay? Just leave it on a cliffhanger or something.
Oh, right. Okay, well, go ahead with the line again.
Oh, I think it's time we looked up for once. Into space. Oh yeah, nailed it.
Shut up.